life, and so I would like to give you this as a gift to just honor you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you. We're gonna start off with the video. Actually, leave that up. Thank you so much.
A deadly virus emanating from Wuhan, China is sweeping across the globe.
Something is off.
The disease caused by the novel coronavirus has been titled COVID-19.
What we're being told doesn't add
so
up.
important in this crisis that we in that people
Congress passes a multi-billion-dollar bill that will bring...
There is no cure, no way to treat this illness. All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
There must be a doctor out there who's questioning this.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm the Vice Chairman of Internal Medicine. The only chance to reduce the risks of hospitalization is early home treatment. We can beat this pandemic.
Patients actually think the virus is untreatable. There's such a focus on the vaccine. Where's the focus on people sick right now?
The pressure to suppress any hope of treatment is extraordinary.
Why the single-minded focus on the vaccine? What is that? What is that about?
That's really going to be the goal of investigative reporters to figure this out.
Unprecedented lockdowns, devastating economic damage, huge violations of personal freedom, families separated from their loved ones, all in the name of a medical emergency.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to the entire world.
The hope we have of protecting our communities is to get a needle in every arm.
I am not going to follow what you are suggesting and let the virus slaughter my patients. John, I'm watching what's happening. This is a treatable illness.
I don't think this is a matter of academic debate and confusion. What the evidence shows is that this is an organized criminal enterprise. They call this a business opportunity.
People need to know the truth.
We are witnessing the greatest organized crime in history, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
The bio-pharmaceutical complex is using censorship, propaganda, and manipulation to keep people living in fear. But what we need now is courage.
Oh, I bet everybody can resonate somewhat with that video, that you remember this, that if we can have the slides up, that you remember parts of this, right? You remember loved ones in the hospital or being told, all we can do is wait for a vaccine. Being told there's nothing that can be done except wait for the government to tell us what to do in the setting of an emergency. And the most interesting thing about this crisis is how simultaneous it was and how worldwide it was. Everything in that video occurred in every single country in the world at the same time. It was truly extraordinary. So as introduced, I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm a practicing internist and cardiologist, board certified in medicine and cardiology. I trained in epidemiology at the University of Michigan. I lived, for a great period of my professional life here in Michigan. My kids graduated from the Northville public school system. My daughter went to Michigan State, and then later on started her legal career. My son's a resident now at Pittsburgh, and his wife as well is at University of Pittsburgh. And we've all been involved in this great controversy. So I have about 250 slides for your resource if you want them. I'm gonna show about 50 with an outline, but I'm gonna make some comments regarding the bullets of what I feel is a great controversy that we are in right now. All of us now have become virologists. Even the average person on the street knows what a nucleocapsid is, knows what a spike protein is. The spike protein is the engineered part of this chimeric virus. It was engineered collaboratively, organized by Dr. Anthony Fauci, The chief scientist was Dr. Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The coordinator who coordinated this across the globe was Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance. And then the person who actually physically did the work in her team was Dr. Xingling Li in Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is now all fully understood, exposed in the COVID House Select Committee investigations led by Representative Brad Wenstrup. Chip Roy is on that committee, as well as Marjorie Taylor Greene. Recently, I testified on Capitol Hill just 2 days after Fauci was there. Actually, the same group who questioned Fauci is the group that questioned me. And one of the interchanges that we had, it became known that Fauci did concede the creation of this virus was for the purposes of making a vaccine. That's what it was all about. That is what Disease X is all about that Dr. Brownstein showed you. So there is a worldwide scientific agenda to create biological threat after biological threat. The United States has been preparing for this for years. We have the 2005 CARES Act that said there will be biological threats and there will be government countermeasures, which are vaccines. It was written by HHS in Congress in 2005. Okay, so this has been planned for a long time that we would get into this circumstance that we are in now. But as citizens and as doctors and healthcare professionals and mothers and fathers, we have to defend the issue of public safety. That for new biologic products, we have to demand safety, safety, safety. I was having some conversations with some of our representatives and senators here in Michigan, and I was informed that the majority of people in the crowd are conservative, and they are on the side of freedom, of vaccine choice freedom, medical freedom. But I said, yes, freedom is kind of step one of rectifying this problem that we're in. Step two is to recognize, our candidates to recognize that we've got a consumer product safety issue on our hands of massive proportions. And so as you work with your candidates and your favorites, make sure that they fundamentally understand that freedom, of course, is what we all have as our inalienable right. And we will never give it up. But we will not allow or tolerate any candidate to sit there and watch a catastrophe unfold on the U.S. public. It's unacceptable for any candidate to be willfully blind to a consumer product safety issue. They all read this paper. By invitation in the first year of the pandemic, myself and Scott Atlas were writing op-eds in The Hill, which is read by the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. Scott was focusing on masks and lockdowns. I didn't waste my time there. I was all on early treatment and what was going to happen here. This paper is unambiguous. Look at the title. This vaccine program was a gamble. It was a gamble for all time with humanity, and I meant it. Dr. Acevedo, White House in Mexico, has done a wonderful job in explaining in the peer-reviewed literature what the genetic vaccines are, the messenger RNA vaccines. They are the genetic code for the spike protein, which was engineered in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The spike protein is the lethal part of the virus. The genetic code is injected in the human body, and there's no way to shut it off. There's no off switch. Some people invariably are going to produce too much spike protein for too long in the wrong parts of the body, and it's going to be fatal. All of this could have been easily predicted ahead of time. It's astounding that you're looking at the only public figure in writing prominently who questioned these vaccines. Not a single chief of medicine, not a single chief of infectious disease, not a single person of medical standing in this state or anywhere in the world put in writing, questioning this. Why wouldn't we question the notion of injecting the genetic code for the lethal part of the virus? We followed up with a paper pretty quickly in 2021 outlining an enormous number of concerns. This paper was sent to every single government in the world, and Roxana Bruno gets a great amount of credit for this. We had a litany of questions regarding these vaccines. Where are they going to go? How do we ensure safety? How are we going to protect populations who could be harmed by the vaccines? Where's the risk stratification in terms of who really would need a vaccine if it indeed worked? And then what's come out in paper after paper, and believe me, what I'm showing you is the tip of the iceberg, because there's so much bias against any manuscript questioning the vaccines. But look at this one. This one is showing you adverse events that are happening in babies who are breastfed by vaccinated mothers. Probably the best example of what we call shedding, or this inadvertent vaccination of people who really are not recipients directly of the vaccine. But what we've learned in paper after paper now is nothing short of astounding. It is really the medical story of our lifetime. This paper from Stanford found the messenger RNA is in lymph nodes at 60 days in women having lymph node sampling. Castriuta in a cohort of hepatitis C patients found the messenger RNA circulating in blood 28 days after injection. People who took these shots simply took them on faith. No one could have known what's going to happen once they get an injection of a brand new technology, messenger RNA loaded on a lipid nanoparticle. This is the only paper of its type, but it has not been challenged, demonstrating that at least part of the genetic code is reverse transcribed into the human genome. Now, the center part, called the PCR, the amplicon, which is a reporter region that the investigators think is pretty reliable, is a human hepatoma cell line, demonstrated that Pfizer, the code for Pfizer, part of it, got in the human genome within a matter of 6 hours. Now, if the entire code is permanently installed in the genome in a mosaic of cells, we could be in trouble, because then even if the vaccine is gone, our own cells could be reproducing this dangerous protein within the human body. Now, a lot more work needs to be done, but I can tell you paper after paper is being suppressed. Research project after project is not being approved. We're seeing institutional review boards not even willing to review protocols on this. I've personally spoken to Dr. Whitehouse, who's now going to be doing the research independently. She's getting a ton of vials, since now you can actually buy Pfizer and Moderna over the counter. But what we see paper after paper should not be happening. Messenger RNA in breast milk. Remember, if a drug gets into breast milk, it's a big deal for a lactating woman. Now the vaccine getting into the placenta, getting in the placenta. Pregnant women and women in childbearing potential were specifically excluded from the clinical trials, should never have received an experimental genetic vaccine coding for the lethal part of the virus, because there's two patients, the mother and the baby. Pinellas and colleagues showed pregnant women have better outcomes than non-pregnant women with COVID-19. They're the lowest of risk population. Yet when the vaccines came out in the first week of the vaccine campaign, over 3,000 pregnant women were vaccinated. They were not excluded. In fact, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology said in an unprecedented manner that pregnant women should take the vaccine at any time during pregnancy. Remember, the first trimester is organogenesis. That's when the baby's forming. The middle part and the late part, that was unprecedented, to show absolutely no concern for the mother or the baby. Now, just breaking this week, the results of the first randomized trial of pregnant women taking the vaccine shows a 4-to-1 increased rate of birth defects in the babies. in Pfizer's own study, which they cut short. The news that DNA fragments or process-related impurities in 2 papers are found in the vaccine. SV40, simian virus 40, which is a known proto-oncogene activator, the promoter, the enhancer, the origin of insertion, antibiotic-resistant genes. This was part of the processing of loading the genetic code for Pfizer and Moderna on a DNA plasmid and have E. coli crank up the production and the manufacturing of so-called process 2 in the production of the vaccines. But there should be measures to keep these contaminants down. And my research has led me, unfortunately, to conclusions like issues of vaccines being contaminated to be an old issue. The smallpox vaccine was grossly contaminated in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Think about it. We had no way of purifying it. It was coming literally from the juices of cows or horses or human to human in arm-to-arm transmission, arm-to-arm vaccination. It had to be grossly contaminated with staph and strep and tetanus and syphilis and foot and mouth disease. People died of the smallpox vaccine in large numbers. What was the government response? Mandatory vaccination, taking kids out of school, putting people in jail. Corporal assault in vaccination with smallpox. That's what happened in our country, in the UK, and in Europe. That's 120 years ago, as if we've learned nothing. And the smallpox vaccine failed miserably, didn't stop smallpox. And just like Dr. Brownstein showed, smallpox basically faded out of existence, not because of the vaccine, but because we had improved hygienic measures. Another example of contaminated vaccines, and there's an Institute of Medicine report on this, and that's the polio vaccine, contaminated with, guess what, SV40. Between 1954 and 1963, 98 million Americans received the polio vaccine. That's me. And it was contaminated with a carcinogenic monkey virus, SV40. The Institute of Medicine has reviewed this. So listen, we can't know how much cancer today is really due to the fact that children like myself were vaccinated against smallpox using this faulty vaccine. There is vaccinated against polio using this faulty vaccine. There is a history of willful blindness to vaccine safety issues. Willful blindness. Because vaccines fall into what's considered an ideology. It's like a religion. And vaccines are accepted as an article of faith. Some of my colleagues, and a few have had the courage to reach back and communicate with me over the last 4 years. So one of them from Johns Hopkins said, well, don't you believe in vaccines anymore? In medicine, we don't believe in things or not. We actually evaluate them. We have a scientific evaluation, a clinical understanding, and we're constantly reviewing the literature. Well, I can tell you the safety review on these vaccines is an absolute catastrophe. And any candidate running for office is willfully blind to what's going on if they are not openly campaigning on this. This is a tragedy. The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System went through the roof when the vaccines came out. The CDC has fully vetted and accepted 18,655 Americans who have died with the vaccine, reported by doctors like me who believe the vaccine is the cause of death. 1,150 have died on the same day they took the shot. 1,150. 1,225 died the day after the shot. The CDC has the patient's name, email, phone number, family member's number, the clinical vignette. Hundreds of papers have been written and analyzed from these, including the vignettes. I've read them. The vaccine looks like it's the direct cause of death. VAERS can be used to ascertain cause of death. We simply read the clinical vignettes and we adjudicate this. The most number of deaths that's ever been recorded in this system for the last 30 years, 150 in a year. 18,655. In the FDA deliberations with the open comments is an underreporting factor. Meaning, if we don't have the vaccine card and someone doesn't take the initiative and have all the information and report it, and the CDC confirm the death certificate and everything else, it doesn't get in this system. A reasonable underreporting factor is 30. 30 times 18,655 is 550,000 Americans who have died after the vaccine. And we have candidates running for office who do not acknowledge this catastrophe. This is worse than the Civil War. This isn't vaccine choice. This is a biological safety catastrophe. In Texas, the vaccines are so dangerous that we had to ban any mandate because we couldn't mandate someone to take a lethal vaccine. That's the reason why vaccines are being banned. It's because they're lethal in so many people. Nick Hosher, who's here in the audience tonight from University of Michigan, has led the most important sets of studies. He's shown that broadly in death, that 73.9% of all the deaths that occur after a vaccine that come to autopsy are directly due to the vaccine. The next person who dies with no antecedent illness, with no apparent reason to die, and they've taken the vaccine at any time, it is the vaccine until proven otherwise. That's a conservative safety approach. Until proven otherwise. A few years ago, we'd hear about correspondents and other people dying right after they took the vaccine. Now the vaccine is being expunged from any press reports. Now they simply die of unknown or, quote, natural causes with no antecedent illness. What you're being told and what you're witnessing is a safety cover-up. Now, fortunately, a large number of people look like they're fine. 30% of people in this study have no side effects whatsoever, not even a sore arm, nothing appears to happen. Just under 2/3 take a vaccine and they have some minor side effects. We're talking 4.2% of people who take a shot get in trouble. It's called hot lots. The explanations are maybe some of the vials have too much messenger RNA in it. Maybe these contamination entities, these purities play a role. There have been visible contaminants in the vaccines. The vaccines have never been inspected for how much messenger RNA is in the vaccine. Of the 75% of Americans who took a shot, 94% of them took a messenger RNA vaccine. Fortunately, we have 25% of Americans, according to the COVID States program, who are free of taking a vaccine. They didn't take one. Thank goodness. Thank goodness we have enough people who don't need to worry about this. But in the Danish study, it was 4.2% of people who are in trouble. In the CDC V-Safe data, of which the CDC refused to release to the public until they were forced under court order, it's 7.7% of Americans are in trouble who've taken the vaccines. I mean, deep trouble. And the news has been bad all the way through. Cardiovascular, neurologic, hematologic, and immunologic problems everywhere after the vaccine. My clinic and Dr. Brownstein's clinic is like a war zone of blood clots, heart damage, amputations, heart failure. People who are absolutely miserable now for years, with deep regret. And every single one of them said, you know, I won't go to the doctor who told me to get the vaccine. Now, I don't see that doctor anymore. So there are doctors who actually are not seeing any of the vaccine complications because the patients, that 5 to 10% of patients who are really damaged, never go back to them. A fifth area of concern is cancer. Now, this paper from Anguis and Bustos, University of Oregon, indicates that there are multiple mechanisms by which the vaccines could cause cancer. When I testified on the Hill recently, I mentioned the FDA says for gene transfer technology products, which are what the messenger RNA vaccines are and what formerly the adenoviral vaccines were, both Janssen and AstraZeneca are off the market. The FDA says we have 5 years minimum, probably up to 15 years of concern, observation, worry. Family members took these vaccines. How long are you going to worry about them? 5 to 15 years after the last shot. That's what the FDA says. People always ask me, when is it over with? Not for a long time, because we don't know the genetic code is long-lasting. The spike protein in the body is even more long-lasting. 3,400 papers in the peer-reviewed literature with a heavy bias to accept none of them. There probably are hundreds of thousands of manuscripts out there regarding serious safety syndromes that cannot get into the peer-reviewed literature. But what's getting in is very disturbing. This paper from Harvard showing the messenger RNA is in the heart muscle. It's physically in the heart muscle. And that white around it is inflammation and damage and edema of cells. Messenger RNA is physically in the heart 30 days later when people die. That means all messenger RNA vaccines will probably physically be in the heart, causing heart damage. There's no reason for us to think that's not the case. That means that Moderna's influenza vaccine and Moderna's respiratory syncytial vaccine, and they've already halted their trials of the Epstein-Barr virus vaccine, will likely cause myocarditis. Get used to saying myocarditis. We'll see a lot of it if messenger RNA technology is advanced like we're hearing is going to be advanced around the world. It is directly cardiotoxic. Ballmeyer and colleagues, staining for the spike protein, which all pathologists should do in all autopsies and biopsies, which they're not currently doing now. As you can see, the heart muscle stains positive for the spike protein. So messenger RNA, which codes and produces the spike protein, is physically in the heart, causing inflammation. The messenger RNA is directly toxic to cardiomyocytes. It causes dysfunction and causes abnormalities in depolarization and repolarization. This is a standard preclinical cardiotoxicity evaluation. If this would have been done ahead of time, in any type of product, it wouldn't have moved forward. It's toxic to human heart cells. Yet the vaccines were rolled out. This study done, University of Texas at Houston played a prominent role, showed that the vaccinated have markedly abnormal cardiac PET scans, positron emission tomography, compared to the unvaccinated. Now, they were getting PET for other reasons, but you can see here on the right is a vaccinated patient where the heart is lighting up red for fluorodeoxyglucose. The human heart should take up free fatty acids as its normal fuel, but when the heart muscle gets diseased and ischemic, it preferentially takes up glucose. Also, cancers do that. Maybe it's microaggregation of red blood cells. Maybe the spike protein is sufficiently toxic to the cardiomyocytes. They get sick and they prefer fluorodeoxyglucose. But this was virtually everybody in the study. I'm telling you, everybody who took a vaccine, whether they look healthy to you or not, I'm concerned about this cardiac finding, because we are seeing cardiac arrests where we don't have classic myocarditis present. But we know from this very important study that cardiac PET scans are abnormal. They were abnormal at least to 6 months out. We don't know how long they're abnormal. We don't know the implications of this. We do know those who had a sore arm had more intense cardiac PET findings. This paper from Harvard, published in Circulation, our best cardiac research journal, showed that young boys hospitalized at Massachusetts General Hospital who had myocarditis, they had circulating spike protein, but the antibodies were not neutralizing the spike protein. It's now been shown that if we keep giving the vaccine over and over again, the body shifts to relatively useless forms of antibodies, so-called IgG subclass 4. They don't bind the spike protein. Now, the boys who were fine with no myocarditis, they had spike protein, but the antibodies were appropriately blocking the spike protein. We have no way of predicting who the next person is who takes a shot who's going to have unopposed spike protein circulate in their body and cause heart damage. This paper I worked with Jessica Rose show of the available studies right now, there is a measurable mortality rate with myocarditis, even within a few months. And it can range from 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. Myocarditis is not transient. It's not self-limited, and it's not benign. It's not. We have no idea how large this problem is. What I'm showing you is the tip of the iceberg. These cases are striking. Choi and colleagues, 22-year-old man, 5 days after the first shot of Pfizer, goes to a Korean hospital. He dies 7 hours later in the hospital, full CPR, full ICU, full everything. His heart biopsy, necropsy at the time of autopsy is essentially rotted out with inflammation and the vaccine. Fatal Pfizer myocarditis cannot be saved. These two boys in Connecticut, age 16 and 17, days 3 and 4 after Pfizer, are dead in bed. Teenage boys dead in bed. No chance for CPR. No chance to be saved. Autopsy performed. University of Michigan, University of Connecticut called in to help the coroner. Conclusion, fatal Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. Every candidate running for office should be talking about these two boys. Parents should be outraged. Parents should be pressing candidates to the wall on this. Why are our young children dying of the vaccine proven in autopsy-confirmed studies? The willful blindness of our candidates is shameful, honestly. This should be an outrage. If people are outraged about a single life being lost due to a murder from a migrant, why aren't they worried about two boys who die after taking a vaccine where it's so clear-cut? Archives of pathology. Well, here's a young person who got the message, Fabian Schrumpf. She took 3 vaccines, got myocarditis. She says, I'm not running. Because it was known before COVID, if there's myocarditis, what triggers the cardiac arrest is a surge of adrenaline. With sports, or typically during the waking hours of sleep like those two boys, she knew it was dangerous to run, and she wasn't going to do it. She was honest. He knew as well, Oscar Cabrera Adames. Now, he didn't want to take the shots. He tweeted out, I don't want to take these shots. He was forced to take them. He's from Dominican. He plays in the European leagues. He has a cardiac arrest on the floor, and he's revived. And he tweets out, I had this cardiac arrest because of these shots. So it's crystal clear what happened. 2 years later, he's trying to come back. He gets on a medical grade stress test, and he dies on the treadmill 2 years later after myocarditis. I'm telling you, it's not over after a few days after these shots. We are seeing cardiac arrest now occurring years after taking these vaccines. Nick Hulscher is here, University of Michigan. This is his paper, outlines the mechanism of what's going on here. The shots are taken into the body. There probably are risk factors. About half the time there's symptoms, maybe we can intercept people. Other half of the time there's no symptoms. The cardiac MRI lights up like a Christmas tree in severe cases, typically the inferior lateral wall, and it's typically the outer part of the myocardium adjacent to the pericardium. We have blood tests and things we can do. Dr. Brownstein talked about using an advanced EKG as a technique. The MRI is not foolproof. The MRI can only take slices at certain distances, and we're seeing the MRI does not completely diagnose all the cases. But when a surge of adrenaline occurs, then the fatal arrhythmia kicks off. This paper has received more downloads and reads than any paper in this journal now for years. It's the #1 paper on the entire preprint server system. Now we're responding to letters to the editor where people are trying to take shots at this. We've just simply described a couple dozen people who died after the vaccine, and the autopsies are conclusive. They have fatal vaccine-induced myocarditis. So without protection from the laws, or the laws, actually the pharmaceutical laws being carried out and enforced, we're in trouble. Pfizer knew about 1,223 deaths within 90 days of their vaccine. Pfizer refused to release the data. They were forced under court order. The FDA protected Pfizer and tried to keep this data from you for 55 years. The FDA did. Now remember, our FDA reports to HHS, and then HHS is the cabinet. We've had two presidents now who have allowed this to happen. 2. And they're both up for election again. Think about this. Talk about government. You saw the videos of election integrity and it looked like it was one-sided. Listen, there's both parties involved here. There's plenty of blame to go around. There's plenty of Democrat on this, and there's plenty of Republican on this. The FDA is covering up safety data on a vaccine that was essentially forced on Americans. It's not safe anywhere. The World Council for Health, which is a worldwide body, has said pull them off the market in 2022. Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, myself and many of the doctors here belong to that group, 2023 said pull them off the market. Tons of data to suggest they're not safe for human use. I've been in the US Senate. I made the call in 2022. European Parliament, in the US House of Representatives. They're not safe for human use. Let's call it. Do you know there's not a single chief of medicine in the country who's come out and expressed their concern about the vaccine? Not a single chief of infectious disease, not a single dean. We have about 200 state and federal officials right now who are to the point where they're saying, listen, these aren't safe. Brad Paquette, Michigan representative, is one of them. If you want to follow somebody on the internet, follow Mary Talley Bowden down in Houston. She is keeping track of this. She's doing a great job. People in Washington know this, though. Don't think that, oh, my favorite candidate doesn't know what's going on. They all know what's going on. So what are the choices? They don't care, or they're in on it. Which one? It's not good, is it? For any of them. Any of them who are not making this a major issue. And think about the candidates too. We have very tight races in our country. Usually, 50-50. If anybody wants to win some votes, that would be a pretty easy way to win some votes. Say, listen, I think we've got a safety problem on our hands. If I get in office, I'm going to call in some experts and I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to make things right. A gushing sound of votes would go to that candidate who cares about 500,000 Americans who have lost their life and millions of Americans now who are injured. So what did the vaccines actually do? What did they do? There were multiple false claims. They never prevented infection with the current strains. They don't stop transmission. They don't reduce hospitalization and death. Not a single randomized trial showed they reduce hospitalization and death. They were false claims. 4 years later, we still have cases of COVID. I mentioned we've had failed vaccines before. The smallpox vaccine was probably the greatest example. A failed vaccine. These are peer-reviewed papers demonstrating hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cases of smallpox of people who are vaccinated against smallpox. It's obvious the vaccine didn't work. It simply did not work. This was 100 years ago. And yet it became mandated, it became part of vaccine ideology. Why? Why does this happen? Fung and colleagues have published on this, saying, listen, the virus mutated. It got milder over time. The hospital EMRs declared everybody unvaccinated by default. Differential testing. The vaccinated were not getting tested where the unvaccinated were. There was no linkage to CDC vaccine data. To this day, the CDC doesn't allow any linking, so we can't do any research with a vaccinated data set. No control over early treatment or natural immunity, the things that really do work. No adjudication for hospital COVID illness. It was just always test positive, and people can test positive for many months after the original infection. And huge conflicts of interest. Fully vaccinated doctors at institutions who mandated the vaccines, I can tell you, I do this for a living. They would not be allowed to publish a paper showing the vaccines didn't work. That would never get approved by the research department or the department chair. This is a wide open set of examples and reasons why there's academic fraud. And I've used that term in the US Senate, November 19th, 2020. And Brad Wenstrup of the House Select Committee is going to call up journal editors and publishers next for the committee, and they're going to discuss academic fraud. Norman Fenton and the group at Queen's in the UK has had a wonderful paper on this recently about miscategorization bias. Do you know when it was a, quote, crisis of the unvaccinated, they simply declared people in the hospital unvaccinated, and it was a fraudulent claim of misclassification. No one was checking to see if grandmother or grandfather had a vaccine card when they're in the ICU in isolation. They were assumed to be unvaccinated. What do the vaccines actually do? The consent form shows the only benefit they claim is the vaccines have been shown past tense to prevent COVID-19. Even the consent form says it doesn't reduce severity, it doesn't reduce hospitalization and death, and it doesn't reduce transmission. If the consent form doesn't say this, why would our FDA and CDC promote the vaccine like this? Why would Pfizer and Moderna promote the vaccine like this? We never promote things beyond the claims made in a consent form. It's fraudulent promotion. The Omicron variant blew through natural immunity, is blowing through the vaccine immunity. The newer versions of the vaccines are so outdated by the time they come up. It's obvious now in any study that has fair access to vaccinated status, the vaccines are failing grossly, just like the smallpox vaccine did. Look at this. 75% of people in the UK, hospitalized, what have you, are vaccinated. In the Cleveland Clinic data, the best is to be unvaccinated. Natural immunity unvaccinated, they have the lowest risk, and those who keep taking the shots, they're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. More shots, actually more COVID. It makes it worse. So this has been a financial bonanza for these companies. John Leake was right when he said it's a crime. You know, a blockbuster drug used to take 20 years of development. The companies did Big Pharma poured a lot of money into this. They could pour in $500 million to $1 billion. If they earned $1 billion in the first year, that was a blockbuster drug. That was Pfizer, blockbuster drug, with Lipitor. Do you know that Pfizer and Moderna have made tens of billions of dollars without the development or sales and marketing cost? Pre-purchased. These were pre-purchased. Nobody knew if they were going to work. As Dr. Brownstein pointed out, whether they're vaccinated or not, some need early treatment. These are the two seminal papers that I brought over the finish line in 2020. I said, listen, we do not have large randomized trials to hand us the answer. We need to use clinical judgment. Let's find drugs that have acceptable safety and signals of benefit, use them in combination, make careful observations, and let's figure out what works. We'll take care of patients and study this at the same time. That's what Dr. Brownstein did. That's what I did. We published the best we could. We understood that the infection had a viral proliferation phase, an inflammation phase, and then in the end, thrombosis or blood clotting. Let me tell you, the blue and the red are far more important than the yellow. And there are plenty of places in the world where they never even treated the virus, and they didn't need to because they just treat the inflammation and treat the blood clotting, and they got through it. Dr. Chetty in South Africa did that. Dr. Eugenia Barrientos in El Salvador did this recently. Sean Downing, who was on my show, Sean did this in Sarasota, Florida. Didn't even treat the virus. Don't need hydroxy or ivermectin. Just treated the inflammation and the blood clotting, and people got through the illness. I've been impressed, as Dr. Brownstein said, with the nasal washes and gargles, something I didn't know about. The quality of these clinical trials and the results are astounding. This is just 1% povidone iodine, a couple of drops of iodine in some saline. Look at everyone's PCR positive. They're sick with COVID. By day 3, the positivity rate is plummeted in blue. Masks didn't stop the infection. Vaccines didn't stop the infection. Social distancing and lockdowns. This was the answer. This was the answer. If we just would have used nasal sprays and gargles, we would have dramatically shut down transmission. I think everybody would have gotten the illness eventually, but we would have markedly reduced people getting very sick. And this was something we could use up front. We could use additional drugs or therapies later on. 20 studies, 17 randomized trials, 53% lower risk. When Representative Nancy Mace found out about this, she went nuts. She goes, why isn't our federal government trying to message this to people. Simple nasal sprays and gargles, povidone iodine, colloidal silver, hydrogen peroxide dilute, xylitol. In our book, and many of you have a copy of the book, we have a chapter in there. Do you know the Federal Trade Commission tied up every single company making a nasal spray or gargle and sued them and did not let them progress in their research or any of their advancements to try to help this. Every single product we tried, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, colchicine, prednisone, monoclonal antibodies, aspirin, nasal sprays and gargles, everything that could help patients was impeded by the federal government. When I told Tucker Carlson this, that's when he went nuts. He goes, we're not talking about one thing. We're not just talking about hydroxychloroquine. We're talking about monoclonal antibodies. Expensive, high tech. They worked. Why did they yank each one of them off the market within a matter of weeks to months? I think it was a vaccine-only strategy worldwide from the beginning. I think John Leake was right. The CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, said, listen, there will be a series of pandemics, and this is a business opportunity for one thing, mass vaccination over and over again. So we've already seen this, right? So we've seen COVID and COVID vaccines, but don't forget, we have also had a worldwide and national declared monkeypox crisis and monkeypox vaccines. We are in the midst of a respiratory syncytial virus bonanza, where every person my age is supposed to get an RSV vaccine. All pregnant women are supposed to get RSV vaccines in the third trimester. All babies should be getting monoclonal antibodies against RSV, and it's being done. It's being done. Disease X, Dr. Brownstein showed you. Something has happened. Something in the human medical mind has clicked in a very distorted, unnatural, reckless way. Everything I mentioned, there's no attention to safety now, none. Look at the data though. This is my number one prevention strategy. This isn't a vaccine. This isn't a drug. This is a xylitol nasal spray, prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial, 71% efficacy of xylitol. A simple nasal spray. You could buy it at any pharmacy here in Southeast Michigan. Why wouldn't we message this to everybody? This is probably the most important thing I've learned. You're around people like tonight. Why don't you go home, use your nasal spray as a bit of prevention, whether it's COVID, influenza, the common cold, protect yourself. Why did we use hydroxychloroquine, aspirin, ivermectin, prednisone, colchicine, cyproheptadine? Because we're supposed to. The FDA says right on their website, when we're faced with an unmet need, we should be using drugs off their original advertising label. That's what we do in medicine. The FDA fully supports the use of what we do. Recently, you probably heard that under a court action settlement, that the FDA now is taking down all of their deceptive statements on ivermectin. Ivermectin has been in the Association of American Physician and Surgeons Home Treatment Guide since August of 2020. Those aligned with Frontline Critical Care Consortium, they've been working with ivermectin in the same time frame. We've used it now for 4 years. It's safer than Tylenol, and in my experience, I think it's one of the most effective drugs we have. We knew by December of 2020 there was clear and convincing evidence that early treatment was dramatically reducing the risk of hospitalization and death. To this day, we could have saved about 2/3 of those lives that were lost. We could have spared all those hospitalizations. But yet we were impeded by every government agency out there, and this happened all over the world all at once. Now we're faced with this issue of long COVID, or patients who've had the vaccine. There are millions and millions of Americans who don't feel well. They have fatigue, neuropsychiatric, cardiovascular, respiratory symptoms. What we know in this paper from Germany is that about 70% of long COVID is really due to the vaccine because people have been loaded with the spike protein of the vaccine. So when you read a manuscript about long COVID, look at it. If it's 2020, it could be long COVID. If it's 2021 and beyond, it's likely the vaccine. Peter Perry from Australia, I think, has appropriately positioned this as a spikeopathy. It's due to the spike protein in the human body, the spike protein, the spine on the surface of the virus. Many medical centers see patients right now. They make no assessment for the spike protein. I bet U of M doesn't do it. I know Mayo Clinic doesn't. People go to the Mayo Clinic for long COVID. They don't even measure anything related to the spike protein. In fact, Texas Medical Center in Houston, they give a vaccine. They actually give the vaccine for long COVID and make people much worse. That's how perverted this is. Brogna and colleagues found that about half of the subjects who take a vaccine have the circulating Pfizer or Moderna spike protein. And one can actually determine this from a molecular perspective in the bloodstream for 6 months. No wonder people feel bad after the vaccine. They have the protein that was engineered in the Chinese biosecurity lab in their bloodstream circulating. This is the worst idea. This was what I was envisioning when I wrote my paper in August of 2020. No one has a clue of what's going to happen when we install the genetic code. So we're working like crazy to come up with approaches to try to rid the body of the spike protein. One is what we call base spike protein detoxification. That is, the spike protein comes from the infection and from the vaccine. We know that the biology is complicated here. The spike protein is in plasma, attached to red blood cells. It's within cells. And what we've proposed is 3 natural substances: nattokinase, starting dose 2,000 units twice a day, bromelain 500 milligrams a day, and curcumin 500 milligrams twice a day. Now, nattokinase and bromelain, they do dissolve the spike protein in preclinical models. We don't know what happens in the human body, but they do in preclinical models. Curcumin in human randomized trials definitely reduces spike protein inflammation, and that's been shown. So this is a proposal. But the Biden administration has spent $1 billion on this. No proposals, no new drugs, no protocols, nothing. Nothing. $1 billion down the drain. And academic medical centers took all this money, and honestly, they blew it. I've checked clinicaltrials.gov, not a single large randomized trial testing this yet. So what have we done? We've made careful observations in our clinic. We have thousands of people doing this. We've advanced the doses. We add other drugs depending on what the syndrome is. We've held teleconferences and calls. I've talked to doctors across the UK who are doing this. It works. We believe it helps people get better from long COVID and vaccine injury syndromes, but it's slow. Could take 3, 6, 9, 12 months. People have been sick now for a couple of years. They're not going to get better in a couple of days. And this is a base. Some people say, well, I want to add N-acetylcysteine. I said, go for it. Add it. Add it to the base program. I want to add what I think is another natural product. I said, go for it. Listen, this is a complicated world. This is a base trio that we think we're low on the doses, but we have to do something to help people, and we're going with it for it. Natural immunity, the best paper to quote is by Chin and colleagues, U.S. prison system, 59,000 prisoners, 16,000 staff. What you need to know is if someone's had an infection with Delta or Omicron and they get another infection in COVID, 0 risk of hospitalization and death, 0. And these are people who are motivated to get out of prison and be hospitalized. So when someone tells you, I got COVID, your first question is, did you have it before, or is this your very first case? If you had it before, they're at the lowest risk. So the new risk stratification paradigm is that previous well-documented COVID is the lowest risk. The vaccine is irrelevant. The vaccine doesn't reduce anyone's risks of getting COVID or change their natural history, but prior infection does. Natural immunity protects. It makes the syndrome milder every time. Last few minutes, I want to change topics about this twin epidemic of autism and gender dysphoria that we're seeing. Many are here because you've been touched by autism. Let's see a show of hands. How many of you have been touched by autism in your family circles or people you know? Yeah, I'm in that group too. It's probably about a third of you. Look at the top left hand. Look at the doses of vaccines starting from when I was a kid in the 60s, 3 vaccines, now to over 108 shots. 108 shots. Excessive vaccination. Excessive. And then look at the complexity of autism and look at autism skyrocketing. So when I was a child, 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 36 and rising. States that have mandatory vaccination for all kids in school with no exceptions, like California, they have autism tracks. There's science and math and arts and technology, and there's autism. It's a tract in school now. That's how common autism is. And then look at the right-hand corner, gender dysphoria, and transgenderism. Those of you who have autistic children will attest that it's extremely difficult. It's a spectrum. I have a very elderly man with terminal heart failure, but he's autistic. He's like Rain Man. He's actually never been with a woman his whole life. He wasn't the high school quarterback. He didn't get married. I bet he had a lot of gender dysphoria over the course of his life. Well, what do we know? In terms of autism, immune dysregulation appears to be a bedrock of pathophysiology early on. This exhaustive review, 236 references, 200 papers, the immune system and cytokines appear to be related to autism. The single greatest perturbation in human immunity during the formative years of life, where autism occurs in the first few years of life, is vaccination. Vaccination. The relationship between the intensity of the vaccine schedule and autism can't be ignored. The big papers like this one by DeLong showed that once we got to combination products, that's when autism started to skyrocket. So once these vaccine products get put into combination, do you know, I think at 18 months now, some of the mothers will know, a child actually gets exposed to greater than 12 different vaccines at once. In the vignettes, when a child has a febrile seizure after a battery of vaccines, there's a paper published in Europe. Once that febrile seizure occurs, there's a 40% chance that child will develop autism. Febrile seizures after vaccines are a disaster. They are not mild, and they're not inconsequential. So when the ACIP panel recommended COVID vaccines be added to the panel down to age 6 months, that's when I think the straw broke the camel's back. The World Council for Health came out with a notice when that happened, and you know what they said? They said parents are urged to adopt a common sense, safer to wait approach. 5 studies show now, in today's world of cleanliness and the way we live today, not 100 years ago, but the way we live today, 5 studies show children who go natural with no childhood vaccines have better outcomes. Lower rates of atopic dermatitis, need for tympanostomy tubes, oral pharyngitis, lower rates of seizures, neuropsychiatric disorders like attention deficit disorder, Asperger's, autism spectrum disorder. Better to go natural. A worldwide evidence-based body says, until things clarify, go natural. Warrior and colleagues showed among those young individuals who have taken the gender journey, they are scoring off the Richter scale for autism. Those who take the transgender journey have pronounced increases in mental health care adjustment, anxiety, mood, and personality disorders. The drugs make the kids sick. The puberty blockers, androgen and estrogens, and it worsens the burden of psychiatric disease. Mortality is up in every study of young individuals taking the transgender. Surgery and medicine increases the rate of mortality. So to summarize, transgender medicine in the youth makes the kids sick, surgery is disfiguring, it's sterilizing, and it increases mortality. That's the reason why in Texas we have it banned. And I wrote the expert report to make that happen. Now, we're here, and I'm going to finish on this because the circle of medical freedom is related to social and economic freedoms. That's the reason why we're here. That's where this started, is the circle of medical freedom was fractured, and we saw everything put us on our heels, and we now are digging in and rebuilding. So to finish and conclude, the pandemic response has been a global disaster. The safety profile now of these vaccines is well known. Limitations of theoretical efficacy has evolved over time. No one believes the vaccines work. The pre-hospital phase of care was always where the action was, and it will be the case with Disease X. We're facing this twin epidemic of autism and transgenderism, and it actually may be related to childhood over-vaccination as an etiology. And censorship and reprisal are working to crush our freedoms, and that's the reason why each and every one of us need to be as bold and relentless as we possibly can. So I want to finish and thank you. And thank you, Michigan, for having me back home. I want everybody here to understand that the moment for you is now. There is no time that's more decisive. Don't look for an elected official to save you. It's not going to happen. You save yourself, and you save your family, and you save your friends, and make your community as wide and broad and healthy as you possibly can. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me.